3 weeks before my son's wedding, a message flashed on my phone. It was from Sarah, his bride-to-be. The words were short, careless, final. Mom for the vibe. Please don't come. I read it twice, then a third time, as if maybe the letters would rearrange themselves into something kinder. They did not. For the vibe, as if my presence, the woman who raised her groom, would somehow poison the air she wanted to breathe on her big day. Before I had time to swallow the sting, my phone rang. It was Camille, the wedding planner. Her voice was crisp, professional, detached. Mrs. Hale, I'm just calling to confirm. We've been told you won't be attending. But of course your deposit remains non-refundable. $85,000. The vineyard, the suites, the chef. I could hear her fingers typing notes as she spoke, moving on with business as usual. To her, I was just another box to check off on her screen. I set down the cup in my hand, a porcelain teacup from Napa bought decades ago, on a trip with my late husband. A fine crack ran down its side, a hairline fracture that never quite reached the rim. I had kept it all these years. I tapped it gently against the table, a hollow sound that filled my quiet kitchen. Then I answered steady and calm. Cancel the vines, cancel the suites, cancel the chef. I own the vineyard and the hotel next door. Silence. Pure silence. I could almost hear her breath catch. Paper shuffled. A chair scraped. She had not expected that. None of them had. People often mistake quiet for weakness. But quiet can hold teeth. Quiet can redraw lines. That day I learned again that a vessel may be cracked, but it still holds water if you know how to carry it. I'm Sylvia Hale. I'm 62 years old. I buried my husband Daniel nearly 10 years ago. And since then, I've lived in the house we bought together with the red brick porch and the roses I planted myself. My son Ethan grew up there eating pancakes at the counter every Saturday, rushing out the door with his backpack half open, calling, "Bye, Mom." He is the center of my life. Even now, I thought that when he found a partner, I'd be gaining a daughter, not losing a son. But families don't always write the stories we expect them to. Sarah entered Ethan's life like a storm in summer, fast, dazzling, and impossible to ignore. She is younger than Ethan with a sharp eye for aesthetics. Everything had to look perfect. The venue, the flowers, the pictures, and apparently the guest list. The first time she visited our vineyard, the Hale Vineyard, she thought it was charming. She didn't know the vineyard had been built on decades of my sweat and my husband's dream. She didn't know that the suites her bridal party had reserved, or the menus planned by Chef Luke, all traced back to me. That was by choice. I had never told her. It's strange, isn't it? Sometimes we hide our strength to make others comfortable. We don't want to appear as if we're showing off or intimidating. We keep quiet, but the cost of silence can be steep. When Sarah texted me those 10 words, "Mom for the vibe, please don't come," she wasn't just uninviting me from her wedding. She was erasing me. And when Camille the planner told me the deposit was non-refundable, she was stamping that eraser into a contract. They thought I would take it. They thought I would stay silent like I always had. They didn't know that silence can turn sharp when you finally use it. They didn't know that the vineyard, the hotel next door, the entire celebration they were building belonged to me. So I smiled into the phone, and I said the words that turned everything upside down. Cancel the vines, cancel the suites, cancel the chef. I own the vineyard and the hotel next door. That was the first domino to fall. And once it fell, nothing in our family was ever the same again. I did not start out powerful. I started out tired, broke, and stubborn, standing beside Daniel on a patch of soil no bank wanted. The realtor called it a hobby vineyard, which is a polite way of saying it lost money. Daniel ran his fingers through the dust and said, "We can teach it to live." I believed him because he spoke softly, and soft words can move rock when you repeat them long enough. The first winter we owned it, the vines slept while the bills did not. I worked days at a clinic and nights at the tasting room we built from a shed. Daniel repaired pumps, patched hoses, and learned to read the wind. My sister Margaret came on weekends with a thermos of soup. She packed cases until her knuckles cracked. We laughed at ourselves, two women arguing over labels while Daniel tuned the tractor. We learned the land like a body, where frost bit, where sunlight lingered, where the soil swallowed water, and where it held. We lost a season then too before something turned. A harvest press clean. A critic noticed. A restaurant in town poured our white by the glass. When Ethan was little, he rode the forklift like a pirate ship and ate grapes until his stomach hurt. He watched me count tips and asked if we were rich. Not yet, I said. We are building something that will not embarrass you. He giggled and tucked a cork behind his ear like a pencil. Then the heart attack came like a thief. Daniel was gone in the space between a breath and the next. The vineyard went quiet. I sat on the porch with a porcelain teacup we had bought in Napa, a fine crack around the belly, and I decided to keep the vineyard because grief needed work more than rest. I learned the parts Daniel had hidden from me to be kind. The spreadsheets, the tax calls, the lender who smiled when we were small and grimaced when we dared to grow. I made mistakes and paid for them. I learned the law that protects a brand and the clause that cancels a lie. I bought the parcel next door when a family moved away. I bought the inn when the owner wanted out. Hale Vineyards and Lodging became a quiet chain of rooms and vines under one signature. By the time Ethan was in college, the company was worth about $60 million, the appraiser said with his cautious pencil. I did not tell Ethan that number. I did not want money to walk into our kitchen at home before wisdom did. I wanted my son to feel like a man, not a beneficiary. So I stayed quiet. I let him think I loved the plants and the people more than the ledgers, which was true, but not the whole truth. Margaret asked once why I did not show the whole picture. Because power can bruise a child if you hand it to him too early, I said. Give him a handrail, not a throne. She nodded and kept packing cases. We both thought silence was tenderness. We were not wrong, not then, but silence grows habits in others too. It tells them you will carry the heavy things and ask for nothing. It tells them your name can be left off the program and the bill will still be paid. It tells a bride she can curate a vibe and delete a mother. I stayed quiet so love could breathe. Then quiet became a door they shut in my face. That morning when Sarah texted me, I set the Napa cup down and felt the crack with my thumb. A vessel can be flawed and faithful at the same time. You just need the right hand to lift it. I decided to be my own steady hand. The morning after Sarah's text, my phone did not rest. First it was Ethan. His voice carried that practice calm he uses when he is nervous. Mom, let's keep this light. Sarah just wants the day to feel easy, you know. No pressure, no family tension. He said the words as if I were the tension itself, as if my presence were a storm cloud. I answered slowly, careful not to spill heat. I thought weddings were about families standing together. He sighed, silence stretched. Then he repeated, "It's for the vibe, Mom. Just let us have this." Not long after Sarah called herself. Her voice cracked, almost rehearsed. She cried softly, telling me she worried I would make people uncomfortable. "You're strong, and sometimes that can feel intimidating," she said. I listened, not correcting her, not feeding the performance. She wrapped her words in fear, but left no space for my dignity. I thought of the years I had carried her fiancé on my hip, wiping jam from his chin, sewing patches on his jeans. Intimidating was a strange word for love that had worked its hands raw. By afternoon, a new number appeared. Linda, Sarah's mother, introduced herself in a tone polished with sweet varnish. "Sylvia, dear, I hope you understand. This is their day. Best to let the young ones make their choices without interference." Interference. That was the word she chose for a mother attending her only son's wedding. I thanked her politely and ended the call. When kindness is sharpened into a blade, the cut stings deeper. Later, Camille the planner circled back with careful phrasing. "Mrs. Hale, I'm confirming that all contracts remain intact. The bride's side indicated your deposit should be honored. The event will proceed smoothly even if your attendance is not expected." Not expected. Another phrase for erased. She was trying to keep her tone neutral, but I heard the current beneath it. Money in, name out. I set my notebook on the counter and wrote everything down. Date, time, exact words. I tapped the record button on my phone before the next call. Gaslight is slippery, but paper holds still. They might recast my presence as drama, but the record would remain. That evening, I forwarded the notes and recordings to Avery Chen, the attorney who has advised me since Daniel's passing. Avery read fast and spoke faster. "Sylvia, you are the contracting party of record. Do you still hold signature authority?" I opened the email folder Daniel had once labeled Iron Keys. At the top sat the scanned agreement, 10 years old, bearing my signature alone. The authority had never been transferred. I felt my pulse slow, even as Avery confirmed it. Then no one else has the right to alter attendance terms while retaining your funding. That is misrepresentation at minimum. I closed the laptop and stared at the crack in my porcelain cup. I thought of Ethan's sigh, Sarah's tears, Linda's sweet poison. Each voice tried to make me smaller. Each call dressed cruelty in reasonableness. And yet, tucked inside an old email, the truth sat firm. Still, the question nodded. Should a mother fight her own child on paper even when the law stood on her side? Should I be the one who drags contracts into a church aisle? Love whispers. Yield. Dignity answers. Stand. I sat in that space between them, the weight of motherhood pressing against the weight of self-respect. I poured a little wine into the cracked cup, watching the liquid pool without leaking. The vessel held because I knew how to carry it. I had held silence for decades to keep peace. But silence, I realized, was being twisted into consent, and I could not consent to my own erasure. Rosa knocked on my back door just after sunrise jacket, zipped hair tied with the red bandana she saves for pruning. She is 55, a widow like me, and she has worked these rows long enough to know each trellis by sound. She stepped inside without ceremony and held out a book with both hands. For you, she said. From him. The book was our old season ledger, the one Daniel kept before I typed his notes into spreadsheets. The cover had gone soft with years. The spine sighed when I opened it. Inside was his handwriting, careful dates, and weather sketches, circles around mildew stars for the rows that behaved. Rosa pointed to a margin where he had written in block letters, "Hold fast." We sat at the kitchen table. Light came through the curtains in narrow ladders. I set out 2 cups and reached for the porcelain one from Napa. The hairline crack shone like a pale thread around its belly. I touched it with my thumb. Rosa watched my hand and laughed softly. "You remember the day it chipped?" she asked. I did. We had been late and the chain on the tractor slipped. I ran to fetch the thermos, tripped on a hose, and the cup bounced across the porch like a stone over water. I cried over ceramic while Daniel crouched to gather the pieces. "Don't throw it away," he said, holding the largest shard to the light. "The crack tells a story. Besides, it still holds. We just have to carry it right." He glued the handle back on that night and drew a tiny line in the ledger next to the frost forecast. A private joke I only catch now. Rosa flipped pages until she found a spread from the year before he died. Notes on canopy. A small heart beside the block we planted the week Ethan turned 10. "He wrote so you wouldn't forget," she said. "But you haven't forgotten." They have. She meant the people building a wedding, all surface, no roots. I poured tea. The steam curled, then thinned. Rosa cupped her hands around her mug and looked at me steady. "Miss Hale," she said, "they want to erase a story, not a cup. They think a vibe is more important than the woman who made the field ready." She reached across and pressed the ledger's edge so it would lie flat. "You kept quiet so the fruit could speak. Now they are using quiet to pretend you were never here." Her words landed without fuss, like winter rain sinking into well-tilled soil. I traced the ink where Daniel had drawn a tiny cluster and wrote, "Third leaf finally sings." The page smelled of dust and eucalyptus. Outside, the wind moved down the rows. "What do I do?" I asked to keep from breaking the cup. Rosa tilted her head. "You carry it like you always have. 2 hands. No apology. And if someone tries to snatch it, you hold tighter not to hurt them, but to keep the tea from spilling." She tapped the ledger again. "There is a way to stand that is not a shove." I closed the book and set it beside the cup, so the crack and the word "hold fast" were in the same frame. "Thank you," I said. Rosa shrugged. "He told me once you were the root, and he was the trellis. Roots do not brag. They also do not move." I breathed steady as new winter. She rose, kissed my hair like a daughter, and left for the vines. The gate at Hale Vineyards is iron-painted black and heavy enough that it groans when I swing it open. Beyond it, the rows rolled down into the valley, winter bare but steady vines tied like patient hands behind their backs. I stood there, with my scarf pulled close, holding the folder Avery had brought. He parked his sedan beside the stone pillar and walked to me with that quick lawyer-stride papers tucked under his arm. "Mrs. Hale," he said businesslike. We have options, none of them require shouting. He placed the folder on the flat of the gatepost and opened it with 2 fingers. Inside were 3 tabs each, a path written in black letters. Option 1, suspension pending verification. That means we freeze all vendor activity until authority is clarified. No contracts are broken, but nothing moves forward either. It's a pause, not a strike. He looked at me, making sure I understood. Option 2, claim of unauthorized contact. That clause states no third party may alter agreements without written approval of the contracting authority. Since you never signed over your rights, any instruction from Ethan, Sarah, or Linda has no legal weight. We can nullify their requests. He tapped the page. And option 3, defamation. They suggested to vendors that you were unstable. That opens a door we could walk through if you choose. I listened while the wind threaded itself through the bare canes, making a sound like paper torn gently. The gate pressed cold against my palm. Avery's tone was precise, not cruel. He was offering tools, not revenge. They will say you are ruining a wedding, he added softer. Our answer will be simple. You are protecting agreements you lawfully hold. This is not about anger. It is about contract. I thought of Ethan's sigh on the phone, Sarah's tears that felt rehearsed, Linda's sweet voice sharp underneath, each one a blade telling me to yield for the vibe. Yield, yield, yield. But here, in Avery's folder, was the other voice, the one Daniel once taught me. Hold fast. I opened the folder wider. The defamation clause looked harsh in print words about damages, injury to reputation, recovery of costs. I imagined courtrooms reporters, Ethan shrinking in the back row. My chest tightened. That was not my path, but suspension pending verification. That one rang true. It was clean, temporary enough to remind them I was still here, without tearing everything down. I lifted the pen Avery handed me. My hand did not shake. Are you sure? He asked. I nodded. This is not retaliation. This is clarity. We suspend until the record is corrected. I signed my name, Sylvia Hale, across the bottom, black ink on white. No raised voice, no slammed door, only paper. For a long moment, we said nothing. The only sound was wind moving through vine leaves left from last harvest, brown and curled, rattling like thin bones. I looked down the roads that Daniel once walked, hands brushing tendrils, whispering forecasts only the plants believed. The valley waited quiet, as if it too had signed with me. Avery closed the folder and tucked it back under his arm. They will know by morning. Vendors must obey the suspension order. No event moves forward without you. I thanked him. He shook my hand firmly, then left me at the gate. I stayed, one hand on cold iron, one hand in my pocket holding the key. Silence has many shapes. Sometimes it is weakness, a swallowed word. Sometimes it is the strongest act you can make. That day at the gate, silence was my answer. The vines did not move, but the wind did. It swept down the valley, carrying with it the message, no text, no tear, no polished phrase could erase. I am still here, Ethan. I am writing this at the kitchen table where you learn to count by lining up blueberries across the wood. The house is quiet. The vineyard is asleep. I do not know if I will ever send this. Maybe it will live in the drawer with spare keys and old photos. You told me you wanted the wedding to feel easy. You said it was for the vibe. I understand the wish. Ease without truth ferments into something bitter. It looks pretty in the glass and burns your throat when you swallow. I chose silence, so that you could grow without the shadow of a powerful mother narrowing your sky. When money began to gather like birds on a wire, I pushed it off the kitchen table. I taught you to fuel a beater car and to apologize. I made you earn summer jobs under your own name. I sat in the bleachers and clapped like every other mother. I do not regret it. That mattered, but silence can be read like an empty chair. People write their own stories in the space where your name should be. Soon, the story hardens into policy. I watched that happen this week. Sarah texted, the planner confirmed. Her mother called with honey in her voice and a knife in every sentence. They did not ask whether I was welcome. They informed me the deposit could stay, the woman could go. I felt anger. Then I felt the old discipline return. I called the lawyer. I read the contracts I signed. I opened the Iron Keys folder and remembered what I control and what I refuse. I do not raise my voice. I raise the standard. This is the rule I wish I had taught you more directly. Standards protect everyone in the room, especially the ones who think they do not need protecting. There is something else I should have said when you called. I know that I am a strong flavor. Strength looks like judgment. Competence can feel like criticism. I cannot make myself smaller to keep anyone comfortable anymore. Shrinking is not hospitality. Shrinking is a slow erasure. If I model it for you, you will learn to ask the people who love you most to disappear whenever a room gets delicate. I will not teach you that. I raised you to keep your word. A contract is a promise with dates on it. I am the contracting party for the venue and the hotel. I signed because your father trusted me to build shelters that hold. When others tried to speak for me this week, they crossed a line I cannot ignore. I pressed pause, not because I wanted revenge, and not because I wanted an audience, but because pause is the smallest tool that still tells the truth. I am not asking you to choose between your wife and your mother. That choice is false and cruel. I am asking you to choose between a wedding that looks good in photographs and a marriage that can survive an honest boundary. The boundary is simple. Do not erase the person who paid the bill. Do not erase the person who raised the groom. Do not erase your own ability to say this is wrong, even when silence would be easier. You may be angry with me today. You may call it stubbornness. You may call it pride. I can live with either word. Pride in my dictionary is the straight back you keep when you sign your name. Stubbornness is the decision not to abandon yourself to keep the peace. We will need a measure of each if the family we are building is going to hold. When you were 6, you dropped the little porcelain cup we bought in Napa. It cracked around the middle and you cried as if you had broken the sky. Your father glued it. We kept it. We drink from it. The line around its belly holds a history of clumsy hands and careful mending. I am setting this letter beside that cup tonight. If you come by tomorrow, you will find them together on the table. If you do not, they will wait. I love Sarah because you do. I will not pretend that love erases the work two people must do. Tell her this from me. I am not asking for a spotlight. I am asking for a chair with my name on it. The room is big enough for grace and for truth. If you read this someday, know that my silence was always meant to make room for you, and that my voice today is meant to make room for me. Both rooms belong in one house. The doors swing on the same hinges. With love, Mom. The suspension order went out at 8 on a Tuesday morning. Avery sent the notices with his usual clipped language. Nothing ornamental, just weight carried in plain print. By 9:00, the dominoes began to tip. First came Camille the planner. Her voicemail was strained formal. Mrs. Hale, we've received legal instruction to halt all coordination for the Hale Vineyard event until verification of authority is complete. Please confirm if this is accurate. She had built her reputation on smoothing storms. Now she was caught in one she could not spin. I did not call her back. The document spoke for me. Next was Marco, the general manager of the inn beside the vineyard. He knew me well enough not to waste words. His email was one line, per instruction. All blocks released. No new reservations accepted until you lift the freeze. The hotel lobby that morning would have echoed with unanswered questions. Guests redirected. Clerks following scripts they did not understand. But Marco followed mine. Then Chef Luc called his French vowels clipped short. Madame Hale, we received notice to suspend all tastings, menu planning, and catering prep. Shall I inform my staff to stand by? I told him yes. He did not argue. He had once watched me fire a supplier who tried to slip in inferior cuts. He knew when a decision was not up for discussion. Each confirmation landed like a stone in still water, sending rings outward. The family had treated my role as decorative. A woman with a checkbook and no spine. Now the industry recognized the line had shifted. I spoke little, only a few acknowledgments, and then I hung up the phone. Silence did the work. I stepped outside and walked toward the storage house. The morning air carried the cold bite of February, sharp enough to wake me. Inside, rows of oak barrels stretched into shadow. The scent of wood and ferment holding the air close. My hand brushed the curve of one cask. The sound it gave back was hollow, a soft thud that traveled through my palm. Each barrel was a contract too, waiting holding not yet released. The vineyard was still. Pruning would begin in March. The vines stood bound and leafless, but beneath the soil they were alive, storing energy for spring. I thought of that as I listened to the dry creak of wood around me. Things look dormant when they are only gathering. The notices had gone out to Camille, to Marco, to Luke. By noon, the entire chain would know the pause was mine to control. No explanation, no dramatics, just a suspension stamped with my authority. I sat on a crate and let the silence build. My phone buzzed with numbers I recognized and chose not to answer. Sometimes the most powerful word is nothing at all. Let them sit with it. Let them learn the weight of an absence they try to design. The barrels answered me again when I rose, the small knock of wood against wood. It sounded like agreement. They gathered at Linda's house the night the suspension took hold. Word reached me through neighbors and through silence. When no one calls, you know they are circling. Her living room was set up like a committee hall. Chairs pulled close, voices rising through the walls. They talked about tours, about vendors who might still take them, about whether another vineyard 2 valleys over would accept a last-minute booking. Each suggestion ran against the stone of reality. The industry knew my signature, and no one wanted to cross it. Linda's voice carried the sharpest edge. We cannot lose face over this. The invitations are printed. People will talk. Her fear was not about love or vows or even Sarah's happiness. It was about appearance. To Linda, dignity was borrowed from other people's eyes. Ethan sat at the edge of the room. He said little, his silence pressed against the walls heavier than any word. I imagined him tugging at his shirt cuff, looking down, not wanting to choose. A son between 2 women, and the only tool he reached for was quiet. They considered threats. Someone said, "We'll move the wedding. She can't own every acre." But they didn't know how far my holding stretched, how carefully Daniel and I had tied each thread. The pause order had already made its rounds. Phones were answered with polite refusals. Availability suddenly vanished. Linda must have felt the walls close in. Yet she pressed harder. We will not let Sylvia dictate. She has always wanted control. The next day, Margaret came to me, my older sister. Her hair, now silver shoulders, bent from years of labor that never earned enough rest. She found me by the rows where the wind pulled at the loose canes. "Sil," she began soft, "don't push Ethan into a corner. He's just trying to start his life. Weddings are fragile things. You don't want to be the reason he breaks with his wife before it begins." I set down the shears I had been using and wiped my palms. She looked at me with pleading eyes, not hostile, worried. Margaret had seen enough family cracks to know how quickly they spread. "Zil don't want him to lose face," she continued. "If this suspension stays, people will whisper that the groom's mother wrecked the plans. Let him stand tall. Don't make him bow before his in-laws." I studied her. For years, she had been my companion in silence, helping me load crates, keeping Daniel's notes safe. Now she wore Linda's worry like borrowed clothing. I asked slowly, "She fears he will lose face, or that I will lose myself?" The words caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it. My question was not sharp. It was steady. A mirror held up. She blinked at it. I never wanted to erase him. I said I wanted to stand beside him, but they asked me to vanish, to give money and disappear. What kind of lesson does that teach? Margaret shifted her weight, eyes lowering. "You know, Linda, she's terrified of gossip. She thinks if Sarah's family looks weak, people will judge. She would rather paint you as the villain than admit she can't pay for the picture she promised." There it was. The fear behind Linda's cruelty, not hatred of me, but dread of humiliation. She believed image was survival. I breathed in and let the valley air steady me. Dignity, I said, does not come from silencing others. It comes from standing true even when eyes are on you. I am not the one teaching Ethan shame. I am teaching him that boundaries are not betrayal. Margaret had no answer. She looked at the rose, nodded once, and left me standing with the shears still in my hand. The rumors reached me before noon, carried not by family but by strangers. A florist I once hired sent a message. "Sorry, Mrs. Hale. People are saying you're blocking your son's wedding, making it hard for the bride." Then came a second note, then a third. By evening, the story had hardened into gossip. The rich mother who wanted control, the widow who couldn't let go. Anonymous messages found their way into my inbox. One read, Shame on you. Let them have their day. Another harsher. Money doesn't buy love. Stop ruining things. No signature, only shadows behind a screen. I stared at the words, the sharpness of them. None of the writers knew me yet, they felt certain. The deposit had become the symbol. $85,000 painted as a leash. They said Sarah was humiliated, that Ethan was caught between an overbearing mother and a wedding collapsing around him. I knew how easily perception shapes truth. It did not matter that I had given quietly that the contracts bore my name. In whispers, I was the villain. I showed Avery one of the messages during our call. He adjusted his glasses, read it once, and set the paper down. People always tell stories to protect their own shame. He said, "This is noise. Our filings are clean. Vendors know where authority lies. Let the documents answer, not your voice." Do I reply? I asked coldly. No. The more you defend yourself in rumor, the more real the rumor becomes. Silence in law is not weakness, it's strategy. I folded the printout, slid it under the porcelain cup on my desk. Tea had spilled earlier, leaving a brown stain that bled into the paper's edge. The ink blurred, but the cruelty remained. I pressed the cup down gently. A cracked cup, a stained page. Both carried stories people preferred not to see. Outside, the vineyard was quiet. Workers trimmed tide, prepared for spring. Each motion practical, unbothered by gossip. Grapes did not listen to rumors. They listened to water and light. I let that thought steady me. The phone buzzed again with another notification. I didn't look. The weight of the cup was enough. The conference room smelled faintly of leather and ink, the kind of air that carries weight without sound. I sat at the head of the table, the vineyard seal etched into the glass wall behind me. Avery had gathered two of his associates, both younger, both alert. The trust documents lay in front of us, a stack thick enough to anchor the moment. He began by reading from the top page. Hale Family Trust Revised 2017 establishes Mrs. Sylvia Hale as sole trustee. Ownership includes vineyard properties, hotel subsidiary catering division, and brand rights. No amendment filed, no successor named. His voice did not need to rise. Each word landed like a gavel. One associate, a woman named Claire, flipped to a section and tapped her pen. Here, Brand Protection Clause language states that any public defamation or misrepresentation affecting the owner's reputation allows immediate suspension of services until resolution. Intent is not punitive. It's to shield the integrity of the brand and event experience. She looked at me directly. That covers the gossip, Mrs. Hale. If they say you're unstable, if they paint you as the obstacle that counts. The room was quiet for a beat. I let my eyes rest on the documents, seeing not only the words but the years they represented. Daniel's hand guiding mine when we first drafted them. His insistence that dignity must be guarded as carefully as profit. He had been right. We do not cancel the wedding outright, I said. My voice was calm-clipped. We suspend under brand protection. Vendors remain bound, but paused. The door is not locked. Avery nodded. Exactly. Suspension maintains leverage without burning contracts. They cannot claim damages. They cannot paint you vindictive. I reached for the addendum draft. It was a single sheet plain, waiting for ink. The clause I had insisted on was printed clearly. Services may be reinstated upon formal apology to the trustee and public acknowledgement of her role as benefactor. Apology to be written, signed, and read aloud at reception. It was not about humiliation. It was about truth. I wanted them to own what they had tried to erase. Redemption was possible, but not free. I signed my name at the bottom, steady strokes S, then H, the way I had done 1,000 times before. The associates exchanged glances, not surprise but respect. They saw I was not flinching. We'll circulate this addendum to vendors within the hour. Avery said by tomorrow every party connected to the event will understand the conditions. The family can choose acknowledgement or nothing. The pen clicked softly as I set it down. No raised voice, no lecture, just paper ink signature. I leaned back in my chair and let silence hold the room. In my mind, I pictured Ethan, Sarah, Linda reading those lines. Perhaps anger first, then shame, then the slow recognition that doors close unless you knock properly. My son might feel torn, but he would also see. His mother was not erased. She had drawn the boundary in legal ink. The vineyard beyond the glass stretched wide, rose-stripped for winter waiting. Power was not in shouting. Power was in contracts that told the truth when people refused to. The revolving door at the hotel lobby always made me pause, glass curved in 4 panels, each slice reflecting back a different version of myself. Widow, mother, owner, outcast. That morning, I stepped in the panels, turning with a hush my coat brushed the brass rail. Light from the Napa sun scattered across the marble floor ahead. It felt like crossing a threshold again. Marco waited near the reception desk, a clipboard tucked under his arm. He was 50 sharp in his dark suit, always steady. "Mrs. Hale," he said, lowering his voice, "I wanted to let you know what happened last night." He guided me aside, away from the flow of check-ins. One of Sarah's relatives called, tried to pressure the front desk into reopening reservations. Said you had no authority, that your suspension was personal. But the junior clerk, David, just 22, stood his ground. He pulled up the file, pointed to your trustee authority, and refused to override it. Marco's smile was small, but certain. He told them, "Mrs. Hale signs every page. If you want this changed, take it up with her directly." I felt the air shift. A young employee, someone who owed me nothing, had chosen to guard my name like it mattered. That was loyalty not purchased, but born. I nodded slowly. "Thank him for me," I said. My voice was softer than I expected. Marco tilted his head. "He already asked me to tell you himself." A few moments later, David appeared from the back office. Nervous, thin-framed tie, slightly crooked. He held a small paper bag folded neat at the top. "Mrs. Hale," he said, cheeks coloring. "I hope this isn't too forward." He set the bag on the counter. Inside, I saw a box of loose tea from a local Napa shop, the kind Daniel used to buy, when we had barely enough money for wine, let alone hotels. I read an old blog post, David explained quickly. It was about you and Mr. Hale. The early days, how you used to brew tea from vineyard herbs when you couldn't afford proper blends. How you called it your lucky ritual before meetings. His hands fidgeted. "I thought you might like this. Just a way of saying we see you and we respect what you built." For a long breath, I didn't answer. The revolving door behind me turned. Guests coming and going, each step echoing. I thought of that blog entry one I had written for Daniel years ago, half diary, half letter. I hadn't known anyone still read it. The fact that a young clerk in my own hotel had, and cared enough to bring me tea, felt heavier than any contract I'd signed that week. I lifted the bag gently as though it were glass. "Thank you," I said. Just 2 words, but the boy's shoulders eased as if I'd absolved him of a weight. Marco clasped my elbow lightly in anchor. "This is what legacy looks like," he murmured. "Not just contracts, not just vineyards, but the people who carry your story forward." I turned toward the revolving door again, tea bag in hand. I stepped inside the panel, shifting me back into the world outside. For a second, my reflection doubled past and present. A widow with lines on her face, a girl who once poured tea in chipped mugs, a matriarch with a vineyard behind her name. As I emerged into sunlight, the air crisp on my cheeks, I smiled quietly, not because I had won yet, but because I realized I was not alone. My family, the one of paper and blood, might fracture, but another was forming seed by seed. The clerk, the manager, the workers who remembered Daniel's notes and Rose's words, chosen, not given. The revolving door turned once more behind me. The storm did not arrive with thunder. It came through whispers dressed as certainty. Linda began calling vendors, weaving her version of events. To her, I was not a widow who had kept a vineyard alive. I was a jealous mother who wanted the spotlight. She told Camille, the planner, that the real issue was my ego, not her daughter's choices. Then she pushed further. On the program, she insisted replace mother of the groom with an escort, just someone to walk him in. She doesn't belong there. The cruelty was casual, practiced. Linda never raised her voice. She dripped poison like sugar, slow and sweet. I did not hear her live, but Avery forwarded me the recordings Camille had discreetly shared. Her tone was polite, rehearsed for the vibe. She said always that word. We must protect the couple's peace. That evening, my phone blinked with a voicemail. Ethan's voice worn thin. "Mom, we need peace. Please don't make this harder than it is. Sarah's upset. Linda's under stress. Maybe just let this go." His words fractured at the edges like glass ready to crack. He did not ask about the truth. He asked for quiet. I sat at the kitchen table with the voicemail in my hand, the tea bag David had given me resting nearby. I did not call back. Silence was my only answer. Sometimes silence carries more weight than argument. The next morning, Avery sent a file through secure email. I opened it slowly. Inside was a transcript. Camille pressured to change the authorized contact on all contracts. Linda had claimed to act with my consent, telling vendors that I was stepping aside for the good of the family. She wanted every communication redirected through her. It was clear, deliberate misrepresentation. Avery's note was brief. "This is the evidence, objective, irrefutable." I read the lines twice, then a third time. The words were not angry, they were worse, they were efficient. Authorized contact to be updated to Linda Walker. The planner had pushed back gently, but Linda had pressed harder. "The bride's mother speaks for the family," she said. The trust documents lay open on my desk, the ink of my signature unshaken by rumor. Misrepresentation was not only an ethical breach, it was a legal one. Contracts exist for such storms. I let my hand rest on Daniel's old mug, chipped and steady. I thought of Rose's reminder. They wanted to erase a story. I thought of Ethan's plea peace at any cost. And I thought of Linda's voice, calm and cruel, rewriting me out of my own son's life. I did not answer Ethan. I did not answer Linda. I did not even answer Camille. My silence was not surrender. It was the space between the strike and the echo. The boardroom sits on the ridge above the valley glass, on three sides oak table in the center. I arrived early and set 3 glasses of water in a neat line. No flowers. Ethan and Sarah came together. They stood close but not touching. Linda was not invited. I had been explicit about that in the email. This conversation needed no chorus. I gestured to the chairs. We sat. I kept my hands folded. They fidgeted. The room held the vineyard like a painting. A hawk circled outside. The air conditioner hummed for a full minute. I said nothing. Silence settled like a cloth over a wound. "Thank you for meeting me," I began. "I will be brief. You have 3 options." I slid 3 envelopes across the table, each labeled. Sarah glanced at Ethan. He nodded for her to open them. She read, eyes moving quickly. He read over her shoulder. Option A. I said cancellation with refund is permitted under the contract. We release all dates and vendors. The matter ends. There is no venue, no suits, no chef. The deposit returns less administrative fees listed on page 2. I let the words land. You will need a new plan. Option B, I said, tapping the second envelope. A simple ceremony at a public restaurant of your choice. I will not interfere. I will not attend unless invited. I will contribute nothing, and I will demand nothing. It is yours to design on your budget. Option C, I said, the vineyard is scheduled with conditions, a written apology signed by both of you. A public acknowledgement at the reception that I funded the event. A commitment that no vendor will receive conflicting instructions again. I will attend quietly. I will sit where you place me. I will not take the microphone. The point is, recognition, not spectacle. No one spoke. The hawk drifted. The sun slid along the table edge. Ethan cleared his throat, failed to speak, tried again. Sarah set the papers down and folded her hands. "Mrs. Hale, I never meant to hurt you." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "I was afraid of looking small in front of my family." She swallowed. "I handled it poorly." It was the closest she had come to an apology. It was not one. I nodded once. Fear of smallness makes people do small things. I kept my tone neutral. "This is not punishment. It is correction." Ethan leaned forward. "Mom, is the apology truly necessary? Could we acknowledge you privately and move on?" He looked tired. Rings under his eyes had deepened since the suspension. "It is necessary," I said. "You tried to write me out. The correction must be public to match the harm. The promise is simple. Tell the truth about who paid. Stop misrepresenting who decides." He stared at the glass of water. His finger traced a ring of condensation. "What if we choose option B? Then you have a wedding on your terms," I said. "And a marriage that begins without debt to me. Some people prefer that." I let the possibility breathe. I would accept it. "And if we choose..." Sarah's chin lifted. She wanted courage to look like control. If you choose A, I said the refund processes within 10 business days. The vendors revert to available. The story ends. There is no shame in starting over. I slid a final sheet across the table. A single sentence with a date and a time. Whichever path you choose, I require your signatures by Friday at 5. Past that, the suspension converts to cancellation under the brand protection clause. More silence. Real silence this time, not a tactic. Ethan looked out at the vines. Sarah folded the envelopes into a stack, as if order could make the decision lighter. He said very quietly, I need time. I have a lifetime, I answered. But the contract has a deadline. We stood. They left with the envelopes. I stayed with the hawk and the hum and the valley below. The room felt brighter when the door clicked shut. Not because I had won, but because the terms were finally clear. The day stretched into afternoon. I walked the perimeter of the vineyard, touching canes, checking buds. The winter air held the scent of dormant possibility. My phone remained silent. No pleading text from Ethan. No honey-barbed words from Linda. Just the quiet of deliberation. I found Rosa in the equipment shed inventorying pruning shears. Her eyes asked the question before her lips formed it. I simply nodded. The terms were delivered. She pulled a crate close, indicating I should sit. Miss Hale, they have never seen a woman stand without raising her voice. It scares them. She polished a blade with an oiled cloth, the metal catching light. Most think power is thunder, she continued. You taught me it's the slow rain that changes the land. I watched her work the rhythmic motion of her hands, weathered but precise. We sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from years of shared labor. No need to fill the space with words when understanding bridges the gap. Behind the hotel's chef, Luke was unloading crates from a farmer's truck. Local vegetables still carrying earth in their roots. He straightened when he saw me, brushed his hands on his apron. I heard from Marco about the meeting. I hope they choose wisdom. The sun caught in his gray hair as he gestured toward the kitchen windows. My staff asks every day when we can return to planning. I miss creating something worthy of your tables. The loyalty in his voice carried no expectation of reward, just the honest admission of a craftsman who valued quality above convenience. I touched a bundle of fresh herbs he'd set aside. This pause hurts many hands, not just those who signed the contract. His eyes held mine. Some hurts teach better than comfort ever could. The lessons that cost nothing are forgotten by sunrise. The back door to the kitchen swung open. A young line cook peered out, caught sight of me, and ducked his head in respect. Even the newest employees knew whose land they stood on. Word travels in small valleys. At home, my answering machine blinked with messages. 3 from Linda, each more honeyed than the last. 1 from Margaret, her voice thin with worry. None from Ethan. I played them while sorting through bills at the kitchen table. Linda's tone seeped through the speaker, practiced charm, barely concealing desperation. Sylvia, dear, let's talk woman to woman. Surely we can find a compromise that spares everyone embarrassment. Her voice hitched on the word embarrassment, revealing her true concern. Not Sarah's happiness, not Ethan's peace, but how things would appear to others. I deleted her message without response. Margaret's voice came next, a whisper, as if she feared being overheard. Syl, please, call me. Linda's telling everyone you've lost your mind with grief, that you're punishing Ethan for moving on. I'm worried what people will think. I pressed the delete button harder than necessary. Margaret had always been afraid of shadows of whispers behind cupped hands. I had spent a decade proving my competence after Daniel's death, year by year, building a reputation for quiet strength. If people would believe Linda's poison so easily, then they had never truly seen me at all. My sister should know better. The kitchen clock ticked past midnight. I made tea in Daniel's old mug and carried it to the porch. Stars pressed against the winter sky, clear and hard as diamonds. The cold air stung my lungs. In the distance, the vineyard slept under moonlight rose like silver threads sewn into dark cloth. I thought of the 3 envelopes, the choices laid out in black and white. I wondered which one Ethan would select, whether he would finally see the lesson beneath the terms. Wednesday morning brought Marco to my door, his dark sedan crunching on the gravel drive. He carried a folder of hotel paperwork requiring signatures, but his visit was more than administrative. Mrs. Hale, there's talk in town. He hesitated, uncomfortable with gossip, but determined to warn me. They're saying you had a breakdown. That you've always been unstable since Mr. Hale passed. His eyes, normally confident, slid away from mine. Linda Walker had lunch with 3 members of the Chamber of Commerce yesterday. I counted the signatures needed signed where indicated close the folder. Truth doesn't need defenders, Marco. It simply waits to be discovered. He nodded, relieved at my calm. Still, he continued. The young staff. They're asking questions. David especially. He wants to know if you're being treated fairly. I smiled at the mention of the young clerk with his gift of tea. Tell him fairness rarely exists in nature. We create it through boundaries. Marco left with the folder of signatures and a small basket of winter herbs from my garden, a peace offering for his kitchen at home. As his car disappeared down the drive, my phone buzzed. A text from Avery. Vendors reporting pressure from Walker family to proceed without authorization. Legal repercussions discussed. I texted back, document everything. We stay the course. The day stretched ahead, empty of obligations, but full of waiting. I walked to the eastern edge of the property where the land dipped toward the creek. Years ago, Daniel and I had placed a stone bench overlooking the water. It was our thinking spot where decisions too large for the kitchen table needed room to breathe. The bench was cold through my coat. The creek ran fast with winter rain clear over smooth stones. I tried to imagine what Daniel would say about this standoff with our son. He had been the gentler parent, the one who found compromise where I saw only principles. But even he had taught Ethan that a man's word was his bond, that agreements mattered. A car approached on the main road, slowing near our gate. For a moment I thought it might be Ethan coming to deliver his decision early. Instead, a white sedan I didn't recognize pulled to the shoulder. A woman emerged, elegant, maybe 50, expensively dressed. She approached the gate, hesitantly, peering through the iron bars. I stood making myself visible on the hillside. She spotted me, waved uncertainly. I did not wave back. After a moment, she returned to her car, made a 3-point turn, and drove away. One of Linda's friends, perhaps, sent to scout the enemy territory. Or a curious member of Sarah's family trying to understand the woman who had halted their celebration. Either way, I had become a curiosity. A specimen to be examined through iron bars. The thought did not disturb me as it once might have. Let them look. Let them wonder. I returned to the bench and sat until the shadows lengthened, listening to water finding its way between stones. The phone rang just after sunset. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for soup. Ethan's name appeared on the screen. I wiped my hands, took a breath, answered. Mom, we need to talk. His voice sounded strange, stretched thin by tension. Sarah and I have been discussing the options. We're trying to understand what you really want from this. What I want, I said, setting the knife down carefully, is already written in those envelopes. He exhaled, frustration escaping like steam. That's not what I mean. If we choose option C, if we apologize publicly, will that really fix anything? Or is this about humiliating us? I measured my response in heartbeats. This is not about humiliation, Ethan. It is about truth. You cannot build a marriage on a foundation of erasure. You told me I wasn't welcome because of a vibe. Sarah's mother called my presence interference. You kept my money while removing my name. That is the injury. The apology is simply acknowledging what happened. The line went quiet. I could almost see him pacing in his apartment phone pressed to his ear, free hand raking through his hair the way he did when troubled. Finally, Linda says you're being vindictive, that normal mothers don't act this way. That's why Sarah was afraid of you in the first place. She says you're unpredictable. The words struck like small stones meant to test my composure. I did not flinch. Normal mothers teach their sons to honor agreements. Normal mothers expect basic courtesy. If standing for that is unpredictable, then perhaps the standard has fallen too low. What does Sarah say? I asked. Another pause, longer this time. She cried all last night. She doesn't want to start our marriage with a public apology. Says it would humiliate her in front of her college friends. Then perhaps option B would suit you better, I suggested. A small ceremony elsewhere, no apology needed, no funding from me. Mom, be reasonable. We sent out 200 invitations. Everyone knows it's at the vineyard. I could hear the strain in his voice, the plea for an easier path. I traced the crack in Daniel's old mug, which sat on the counter near my hand. Sometimes the path that preserves dignity isn't the convenient one, Ethan. You have 3 valid choices. None of them involve erasing me while keeping my money. I'd put on the tea kettle before he called. It whistled now shrill in the background. I have to go, I said. You have until Friday at 5. Choose carefully. I hung up before he could respond. The kettle screamed until I lifted it from the burner. Steam clouded the window above the sink, briefly obscuring the night outside. Thursday morning bloomed cold and clear. The vines stood in perfect rows, patient as prisoners. I checked my email over breakfast, found a message from Camille, the wedding planner. Subject line: urgent, vineyard situation. Mrs. Hale, I regret to inform you that Ms. Walker continues to contact vendors claiming authorization. 2 catering assistants have already been hired against suspension protocol. Please advise on how to proceed. I forwarded the email to Avery with a single line: gather evidence for potential legal action. The violation was so blatant it almost seemed desperate. Linda unable to accept the boundary, trying to force the wedding forward through sheer momentum, as if hiring a few staff could override a contract signed in black ink. My doorbell rang just before noon. I opened it to find Margaret on the step, her silver hair disheveled by wind, her eyes red-rimmed. She clutched her purse in both hands like a shield. Sil, we need to talk. I let her in, watching as she scanned the kitchen. The soup still simmering from last night, the neat stack of bills, Daniel's mug beside the sink. Looking for signs of the breakdown Linda had described, no doubt. Finding none, she settled at the table, refused tea, launched directly into her mission. I spoke with Linda yesterday. She says you're tearing the family apart over pride, that you won't even discuss compromise. Her eyes darted to mine, then away. Is that true? Are you refusing to even talk to them? I sat across from her, hands folded. How interesting that Linda positions herself as the reasonable party seeking compromise. What exactly did she suggest as a fair middle ground? Margaret shifted, uncomfortable. Well, she thought perhaps you could attend the wedding but skip the reception. Or attend both but not be in any of the formal photographs. I let the proposals hang in the air between us, their absurdity speaking for itself. So her compromise is that I remain partially erased, but not completely. I still pay for everything but stay in shadows. Is that what you came to advocate for? Margaret flushed. Still be practical. The invitations are sent. People are making travel arrangements. I studied my sister, this woman who had once packed crates beside me until her knuckles bled, who had brought soup when Daniel was sick, who had held my hand at his funeral. Now she sat across from me, a messenger for the woman who had called my motherhood interference. Margaret. I said finally, you once told me I was too soft with Ethan, that I let him take without giving back, that someday he would need to learn the world doesn't bend for him. Do you remember? She looked down at her hands, the veins prominent against thin skin. That was different. He was a teenager then. He's a man now, I replied, supposedly ready for marriage, yet he wants his mother's money but not her presence. He wants her signature on contracts, but not her name on programs. Tell me how that boy has learned anything about respect. Her lips pressed into a thin line. It's one day, Sil. One party. Is it worth all this? I stood and walked to the window. Beyond the yard, the vineyard stretched in winter stillness. One day I echoed. One party. One moment when a mother is told she is unwelcome at her only child's wedding, but her checkbook is still required. One moment when decades of work are reduced to a deposit slip. One line that once crossed cannot be uncrossed. I turned back to Margaret. This isn't about a party. This is about what we teach the people we love about how they can treat us. If I yield now, what will happen when the baby comes? When they buy a house, will I be welcome then, or only my contributions? She had no answer. The clock on the wall ticked between us, marking seconds of uncomfortable truth. After Margaret left, I walked the rows alone. The vines, though dormant, felt alive beneath my gloved fingers, each one holding the memory of summer in its woody heart, each one waiting for the right moment to begin again. I thought of the 3 options laid before Ethan and Sarah, the deadline approaching, the decision that would shape our family for years to come. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Avery. Multiple vendors report similar contact from L. Walker. Documented. Strong case for legal intervention if needed. I slipped the phone back without responding. The evidence gathered like winter clouds, dark and heavy with coming rain. That evening, David from the hotel front desk called. His young voice pitched higher than usual with nervousness. "Mrs. Hale, I hope I'm not overstepping. Someone came asking questions about you today. An older woman, very well dressed. She wanted to know if you'd ever been difficult with staff, if you'd ever seemed unstable." The word unstable hung in the air like poison. Linda's campaign spreading, seeking witnesses, building a narrative. "What did you tell her?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I told her you were the most reasonable owner I'd ever worked for, that even when you had to make hard decisions, you were always fair." His loyalty warmed me unexpected, as spring sun in February. "Thank you, David. You did nothing wrong in telling me." He hesitated, then added, "Marco says we should document these conversations, that there might be legal issues." "He's right." I confirmed. "Write down what happened, when it happened, what was said. Keep it somewhere safe." After we hung up, I sat on the porch despite the cold. Stars pricked the black fabric of night, countless and indifferent. I wondered how many other employees were being approached, how many other subtle attempts to rewrite my character were underway in the valley. Linda, building her case for the unstable widow, the controlling mother, the unreasonable obstacle to her daughter's perfect day. Friday dawned gray and threatening rain. The deadline day. By 5 o'clock, Ethan and Sarah would need to choose their path. I woke before dawn, made coffee instead of tea, carried it to the east-facing window to watch night retreat from the vineyard. The morning brought an email from Chef Luke. Subject line simply FYI. "Madame Hale Ms. Walker called yesterday, offering to double my usual fee if I would proceed with wedding preparations despite the suspension. When I declined, she suggested you were having emotional difficulties related to your widowhood." I ended the call and documented the conversation. "My staff has been instructed to direct all wedding inquiries to you directly." I forwarded this to Avery as well, evidence accumulating like fallen leaves. The disrespect was breathtaking. Not just the attempt to circumvent my authority, but the narrative Linda was spinning. The grief-stricken widow, unstable, irrational, punishing her son out of loneliness. As if 10 years of competent business management could be erased by a few well-placed whispers. At noon, Rosa knocked at my back door. She carried a basket of early herbs from the greenhouse. Tender shoots of basil thyme, tiny rosemary plants pushing toward light. Her offering and her excuse to check on me. "The workers are asking if they should prepare for spring pruning as usual," she said, setting the basket on my counter. "They wonder if anything will change with the vineyard." "Nothing changes with the work," I assured her. "The vines don't care about wedding drama." She nodded relieved, then more hesitantly. "There's talk in town. People saying harsh things about you. Some believe it, others don't. The lines are being drawn." I took a sprig of rosemary, rolled it between my fingers. The sharp, clean scent filled the kitchen. "A small town becomes a theater when conflict arises," I said. "Everyone wants a role in the drama. Let them talk. The vines will still need pruning when the gossip fades." Rosa studied me, her eyes dark and knowing. "You're not what they're saying, Miss Hale. Not cold, not crazy. Just a woman who finally stopped carrying water in a basket." I smiled at the vineyard metaphor. "That's exactly it, Rosa. I've stopped accepting containers that cannot hold what I pour into them." The afternoon stretched toward deadline. 3 o'clock passed, then 4. No word from Ethan, no envelope delivered to my door. The sky darkened with approaching rain clouds pressing down on the valley like a lid on a pot. At 4:30, my phone rang. Sarah's name on the screen, not Ethan's. Interesting. I answered, said nothing, waited. Mrs. Hale's Sarah began, her voice small but controlled. "I've been thinking about everything, about the text I sent you, about how it must have felt, about what my mother said to you." I remained silent, letting her fill the space with her reckoning. "I was wrong," she continued. "I was afraid of being overshadowed, of looking like I couldn't afford my own wedding. My mother kept saying you would take over, that you'd make it all about Ethan and nothing about me. I believed her. I made a mistake. The admission hung between us, incomplete but honest. The apology matters to you, doesn't it? She asked finally. Not to hurt us, but because you need to know we understand what we did. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly it. The silence stretched between us, filled with the sound of rain beginning to fall on the roof. Soft at first, then harder. We'll take option C, she said at last. We'll sign the agreement. We'll acknowledge your role at the reception. Ethan will write a letter. I'll write one too. Real ones, not just what we think you want to hear. I want to start this marriage right. Not with lies, not with erasing people who matter. The rain drummed steadily now, a rhythm like applause. Something in my chest loosened a knot I hadn't realized was there. Send the signed document by 5, I said. We'll move forward from there. She agreed, and we ended the call without further discussion. No false warmth, no pretended intimacy. Just a clear agreement between two women who had seen each other truly for the first time. At 4:55, Marco called from the hotel. Mrs. Hale, a courier, just delivered an envelope for you. Should I bring it up to the house? I looked out at the rain now falling in sheets. No need to get soaked, I told him. What does it say? I heard paper rustling as he opened it. It's option C, he confirmed. Signed by both Ethan Reed and Sarah Davis. Dated today, timestamped 4:45 p.m. I felt something between relief and vindication. Not victory. That wasn't what I'd sought. But acknowledgement, recognition, the basic respect of being seen. Tell Camille the suspension is lifted, I instructed Marco. Vendors can resume planning, but all decisions still require my approval. As the rain continued to fall, I made tea in Daniel's cracked cup and carried it to the porch, protected from the downpour by the deep overhang. I sat in the glider, watching water sheet off the roof and puddle in the yard. The vineyard beyond was a gray smudge in the distance, rose blurred by rain. I thought of Sarah's voice, the unexpected honesty in it, the acknowledgement of fear beneath the cruelty. I thought of Ethan, silent, letting his fiancée make the call he should have made. Still learning, still growing into the man I hoped he would become. I thought of Linda, her carefully constructed narrative now crumbling at the edges. The rain would nourish the dormant vines, seep into soil, prepare the earth for spring, water finding its way through darkness toward roots. Sometimes blessings arrive disguised as storms. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. Avery confirming receipt of the signed agreement. Suspension officially lifted. Terms clearly outlined. Next steps proposed. I scrolled through his detailed plan. The formal letters due within a week, the revised seating chart acknowledging my role as mother of the groom, the public statement to be read at the reception. All of it spelled out in precise legal language. All of it transforming a hurt into a contract, a wound into a binding agreement. Some might call it cold to reduce emotion to paragraphs and signatures, but I had learned that paper holds what hearts sometimes cannot. That ink remembers when memories conveniently forget, that boundaries drawn in legal language are harder to cross than those marked only by trust. As darkness fell completely, my phone lit up with another call. Linda Walker. I let it ring through to voicemail, sipping my tea as her message recorded. I played it back immediately, curious what surrender sounded like in her voice. Sylvia, I understand they've signed your agreement. I hope you're satisfied. Her tone dripped with barely contained fury. Sarah is devastated, humiliated. This should have been the happiest time of her life, and you've turned it into a power play. I've never seen such selfishness from a mother. I deleted the message halfway through. Linda was still fighting a battle already lost, still casting me as the villain, in a story where the real antagonist was erasure. Saturday morning brought unexpected sunshine. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Puddles reflected blue sky, and the air smelled of wet earth and possibility. I walked the perimeter of the vineyard, noting which sections would need attention first when pruning began. The work centered me as it always had. A black sedan approached on the main drive, slowing as it neared. Avery Chen, immaculate, even on a weekend, stepped out carrying his customary folder. He spotted me among the vines and walked over dress shoes inappropriate for the muddy path, but somehow remaining unsoiled. Mrs. Hale, he nodded formally. I've drafted acknowledgement statements for your approval. The letters from Mr. Reed and Ms. Davis are due Tuesday. We should discuss placement at the reception and visibility of your role. I led him to the small stone table near the tasting room, a quiet spot with views of the valley. As he spread documents before me, I felt a strange lightness. This wasn't about vengeance or control. It was about creating a clear record, a true accounting, putting names to roles, acknowledging contributions, the basic courtesies that make families function. Avery pointed to a paragraph midway down the page. This section outlines the public acknowledgement. We've kept it dignified, brief, but clear. Your contribution will be recognized, your role as mother of the groom properly noted. Nothing excessive, nothing that could be construed as punitive. I read the words carefully. They were perfect, straightforward, honest, without emotional flourish. I signed where indicated, watching my name form in black ink. Sylvia Hale, the same signature that had purchased this land decades ago. The same hand that had signed Daniel's medical forms, Ethan's school permission slips, countless contracts that built a $60 million business from dust and determination. Linda may cast me as unstable, as grief-stricken, as vindictive. But paper knows the truth. Ink remembers what convenient memories forget. My name, written in my own hand, was the most stable thing in this entire situation. As Avery gathered the signed documents, a text arrived from Ethan. "Mom, can we meet tomorrow, just us? I need to talk to you." The request surprised me. No mention of Sarah, no hint of Linda's involvement. Just my son asking for his mother's time. I texted back a simple yes and suggested Sunday brunch at the house. He agreed immediately. After Avery left, I walked further into the vineyard to the section Daniel and I had planted the year we bought the property. The original vines now gnarled and strong, their woody arms reaching like old men stretching toward sun. I placed my palm against one thick trunk, feeling the life dormant within it. These vines had seen everything. Our early struggles, the seasons of failure, the slow turn toward success. They had witnessed Daniel's final harvest and the decade of widowhood that followed. They had watched Ethan grow from a boy riding the forklift to a man preparing for marriage. They knew the truth of who had tended them season after season through frost and heat and uncertainty. No matter what narrative Linda spun through the valley, these rows knew my hands, my footsteps, my voice directing workers through pruning and picking. The land remembered what people conveniently forgot. That memory was its own kind of justice. I carried that thought with me as I returned to the house, a certainty solid as the earth beneath my boots. Sunday morning, I prepared brunch with careful attention. Fresh bread from the oven, herbs, from Rose's greenhouse, eggs from the farm down the valley. Daniel's favorite coffee brewed strong in the pot. I set 2 places at the kitchen table, the same spots where Ethan and I had eaten thousands of meals together through the years. When his car pulled into the drive, I watched through the window as he sat a moment before getting out. His shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath, steeling himself. For confrontation. For reconciliation. I couldn't tell. The door opened and his boots scraped on the mat, a childhood habit I'd insisted on to keep mud off my floors. "Mom," he began as he entered the kitchen, then stopped. The familiar smell seemed to catch him off guard. Bread, coffee, the lavender I always kept in a jar on the windowsill. For a moment, he looked like the boy who had come home from college breaks, hungry for home cooking and simplicity. I've been thinking about everything he said, finally accepting the coffee I offered. About what we did, what I allowed to happen. He stared into the mug, avoiding my eyes. "Sarah told me she called you, that she apologized, that she's writing her letter already." I nodded, waiting. "I should have been the one to call," he admitted. "I should have been the one to fix this from the beginning. When Sarah suggested uninviting you, I should have said no immediately. When Linda started talking about you like you were a problem, I should have defended you. I didn't. I just wanted peace. Peace at any price isn't peace," I said gently. "It's surrender." He nodded, a flush creeping up his neck. "That's what I've realized. I surrendered you to keep everyone else happy. I was embarrassed by how much you've given us, by how much I still need you. It was easier to pretend you were the problem than to stand up to Sarah's family." I poured more coffee, cut slices of warm bread, gave him time to find his way. "This is hard for you. I acknowledged. Harder maybe than for Sarah. She acted out of fear of being overshadowed. You acted out of fear of choosing between women you love. Both fears are real. Neither justifies erasure. He looked up, then meeting my eyes for the first time. His were red-rimmed, shadowed by sleepless nights. "I'm writing my letter today," he said. "Not just because the contract requires it, but because I need to put into words what I'm trying to say to you now. That I'm sorry. That I was wrong. That I forgot who raised me to be better than this." We ate in silence for a while, the simple comfort of shared food bridging what words could not. Outside, birds returned to feeders. I kept filled through winter, their small bodies flitting against gray sky. Life continuing, adapting, finding nourishment even in barren seasons. "I'm afraid," Ethan said suddenly, setting down his fork. "Afraid of what I asked, though I suspected I knew. Of becoming the kind of man who lets this happen," he admitted. "Who silences the women in his life to keep peace. Who values appearance over truth. Who forgets where he came from." I reached across the table and touched his hand. The same hand I had once guided to form letters, to tie shoes, to hold a pruning knife correctly. "Fear can be a teacher if you listen to it," I told him. "This moment, painful as it is, can be the foundation for something stronger than what came before." He nodded, and for the first time since this began, I saw a glimmer of the man I had raised him to be. Not perfect, not unfaltering, but capable of recognizing a wrong turn and finding his way back to truer paths. We talked then of practical things, the revised wedding plans, the smaller guest list, the acknowledgement that would be read. When he rose to leave, he hesitated by the door. "Mom," he said, looking back at the kitchen, at the table where we'd sat, at the cracked mug beside the sink. "I was wrong about the vibe thing. Your presence doesn't diminish an event. It reminds everyone that things of value have roots. I need that reminder as much as anyone." After he left, I stood on the porch watching his car disappear down the drive. The sky had cleared, winter sunlight pale but determined. In the vineyard beyond, the vines stood in perfect rows, each one connected underground by an invisible network of roots, each one waiting for the right moment to begin again. In the quiet of the afternoon, I wrote in Daniel's old ledger. Not vineyard notes this time, but a record of these days, of boundaries drawn and held, of silence used as strength rather than surrender, of a mother insisting on visibility, of a son beginning to understand the difference between peace and erasure. When evening fell, I made tea in the cracked Napa cup and carried it to the porch. The valley stretched before me, the vineyard a darker shadow against encroaching night. Winter birds called their last songs before roosting. The world turning towards spring, one cold day at a time. My phone remained silent. No desperate calls from Linda. No plaintive texts from Ethan. No concerned messages from Margaret. Just the quiet of a battle ended not with shouting, but with signatures, with acknowledgement, with truth finally given the same weight as politeness. I sipped from the cracked cup, the tea warm against the chill air. The fracture lines visible, but holding the vessel damaged but whole. Like family, like memory, like love that survives erasure by simply refusing to disappear. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, letters to read, seating charts, to approve, boundaries to maintain. But tonight, in this moment of hard-won quiet, I honored the woman I had become, not by yielding, not by shouting, but by simply standing in my truth until others could see it too. The vineyard keeper, the contract holder, the mother who would not be erased. Dawn lay across the vineyard like a silver shawl. Frost clung to the wires. The rows held their breath. I stood by the loading bay with a thermos when Ethan's car turned up the gravel lane. He parked crooked, sat a moment with his forehead to the wheel, then climbed out. No Sarah, only my son taller than his father, eyes steady and unsure. "Morning," I said. "Morning," he answered. We did not rush toward each other. We walked the first row where winter had stripped the vines to bone. He pushed his hands into his pockets the way he did at 12, when he had done something wrong and wanted to confess without words. He started with a memory. "Do you remember the year the pumps failed?" He said, "You carried crates while Dad fixed the line. Your palms bled through your gloves. I told you to stop. You said the fruit does not wait. I remembered the handles biting Daniel calling, "Keep going, Sil," and Ethan following like a shadow. He stopped. "Mom, I am sorry," he said. "I let people talk about you like a problem to manage. I wanted quiet more than right." Linda pushed. Sarah cried. I thought if I kept my head down, the noise would pass. I made it louder. We moved down the slope. I said nothing. "I signed last night," he added. "Option C. We will write the letters. I will say your name at the reception. Not because you forced me, but because it is true. I owe you more than silence." At the end of the row, the view broke open to the valley. He looked at the hills, then at his hands. "You taught me to steer the forklift," he said. "You let me think I was driving when you were holding the back. I never asked who steadied me when I swerved." I poured him tea. He wrapped both hands around the cup like a boy told to warm up before the game. "Mom," he said, "I want to read something at the wedding. A thank you. Not long, just clear. I want people to know how we got there. I want Sarah to hear it from me. You chose a wife," I said, "not your mother. That is right. But you can choose how to be a husband." I let the line rest. Choose to tell the truth when it costs comfort. Choose to protect dignity both ways. He nodded. "I can do that." "Then do it without turning me into a weapon," I said. "No list of debts, no heat. Say only what is necessary." "I will," he said. We stood while a truck rumbled far off. I thought of the button Margaret gave me, round and steady in my pocket, and the cracked cup at home beside the letter I had not sent. He spoke again, softer. "I told Sarah I was afraid of disappointing you and her at the same time. She said fear makes small rooms. I let the room shrink until there was no chair left for you." He swallowed. "I am opening the room back up." "That is a husband speaking," I said. "I know Linda will be angry," he said. "She will say we lost face." "Faces do not break when truth is spoken," I said. "They heal." He looked relieved. "Will you sit wherever we place you?" "I will," I said. "Will you taste the menu when the suspension lifts?" "I will," I said again. He exhaled. He finished the tea and handed me the empty cup. I capped the thermos and slipped it into my bag. "Thank you for the pause," he said. I hated it. I needed it. "The fruit does not wait," I answered. "But people can." I turned toward the rose. "Go home, write your letter, bring Sarah tomorrow. We will taste the soup your father loved." He smiled, the boy and the man lining up in one face. "I will bring her," he said. We walked back to the loading bay. At the gate, he looked at me like he wanted to hug me, then chose not to, honoring the space we were building. Instead, he touched my sleeve, small and careful, the way you test a wire before trusting its hold. Then he nodded. "I will be the husband I want our son to watch someday," he said. "Good," I answered. "Begin now." He drove away down the gravel lane. Frost lifted from the wires. The valley brightened by a shade. I stood a minute longer, feeling the ground steady under my boots, knowing something had turned and would keep turning if we carried it right. I breathed once, slow and sure, and let the morning hold me upright. For now, here. The envelope arrived by hand. Sarah's handwriting wavered across the front letters, uneven, as if each stroke argued with itself. Inside, on plain cream paper, the apology trembled in ink. "Mrs. Hale, I was wrong. I let fear speak louder than gratitude. I let my mother's pride drown out my own heart. Please forgive me. Please allow me to honor you properly." The words were not polished. They did not try to be clever. They were human, shaky, and in their imperfection they carried weight. I set the letter beside Daniel's cracked cup and the button Margaret had given me, objects in a row scarred, ordinary, enduring. Camille called that afternoon, voice softer than I had ever heard. "Mrs. Hale, I've redone the schedule. The guest count is now 40. We've cut the excess, kept the essentials. No spotlight, no grandeur, just vows, music, and supper. Will you review?" I listened to her list. Smaller hall-trimmed flowers, one-string quartet instead of a band. She had stripped away the show and left something bare, almost tender. Chef Luke came next. "Madame Hale, I added a soup, simple onion, the kind your husband liked. I thought it belonged." His tone was gentle without presumption. I pictured Daniel at our kitchen table, spoon in hand, steam on his glasses, a wedding menu touched by his memory, quiet, unadvertised, but present. I nodded, though Luke could not see. When Ethan stopped by to confirm the changes, I told him my seat. Not the front row, I said. Put me in the middle among the people. Not behind a dais. Not beside a spotlight. A mother watching her son. Nothing more. He looked surprised, then relieved. You're sure I am, sure I said. That is the dignity I want. The vineyard calendar turned its page. Rose-greened air warmed. The wedding would not be what they first imagined. It would be smaller, humbler, but perhaps for the first time true. The valley glowed like a bowl of honey. Evening light streamed across the rows of vines, each leaf holding a drop of gold. Guests gathered beneath the arbor, 40 chairs set in careful lines. Not too close, not too far. The air carried the sound of strings and the faint perfume of roses tucked into jars on each table. I sat midway down the aisle, the place I had chosen, not hidden, not exalted, just present. A mother among witnesses, Margaret at my side, Rosa 2 rows back. Marco and Luke standing near the service tables like guardians in plain clothes. Ethan and Sarah stood at the altar, their hands shaking, but not from fear. The officiant lifted the book, spoke words about love, as patience, about vows, as promises that bend but do not break. Before the rings, Ethan asked for the microphone. His voice wavered at first, then found its steadiness. Before Sarah and I pledge our vows, there is someone we must honor. None of us would be here without her. She gave more than money. She gave the labor of her hands, the strength of her silence, the patience of her love. For years, I forgot to say it. Tonight, I will. Thank you, Mom. He turned eyes meeting mine. They did not beg, did not excuse. They acknowledged. That was enough. Applause rose not forced, but warm. I let it wash over without lifting my hand. Then Sarah stepped forward. She held the mic close. I wronged you, she said, voice plain, eyes wet. I listened to fear instead of respect. I asked you not to come, yet you came anyway, and you gave me more than I deserved. Thank you for teaching me what grace looks like. Her words were brief, but they were hers, not Linda's, not scripted. I believed her. That too was enough. The officiant cleared his throat, returned to the vows. Rings were exchanged, lips met. The valley cheered softly. Later at the tables, candles flickered in jars. I placed Daniel's cracked cup before me, poured a small stream of the new white vintage we had bottled only weeks ago. Pale gold filled the fracture lines. Still, the cup held steady. Vessels crack, I said quietly to the woman seated beside me. But they can still carry water. My own echoed line. Returning home. The cameras recording the day caught the silence that followed. 2 beats of stillness stretched wide enough for breath, for truth, for memory. I did not move houses. I did not sell off the vineyard or announce a dramatic break. Severance, when it came, was quieter than people expected. I signed new papers with Avery, revoked the old power of attorney, drew a clean line around my finances. No more blurred access. No more signatures in someone else's pocket. The trust was settled next. A portion of the vineyard's profits would fund a scholarship in Daniel's name, one for children of field workers, another in Rosa's. She had bent her back in the rows long before the land bore fruit. It was time her name bore something permanent. I felt no anger as I signed, just steadiness. Paperwork can be vengeance, but it can also be protection. Weeks later, Marco asked me to speak at a training for new hires at the hotel. 10 minutes, Mrs. Hale. Tell them why names matter here. So I stood before a dozen fresh uniforms. I told them about a vineyard once called worthless, about a cup once cracked, about a woman once asked not to attend her own son's wedding. Names carry history, I said. And respect is the soil that lets people grow. They nodded, some scribbled notes. One girl wiped her eyes. Afterward, Luke brought out bowls of soup, the same onion broth Daniel loved. Rosa sat with us under the arbor, hands folded over the notebook of harvest she still kept. Marco poured glasses, toasting not profit, but patience. Around that table, laughter rose, younger voices mixing with older ones. None of them shared my blood, yet they carried me more surely than family had in years. A chosen family formed not by duty, but by recognition. The vines outside stirred in the evening wind, leaves rustling like applause. I thought this is what survival looks like, not severing with noise, but building with care. I wrote a new letter tonight, not to Ethan, but to the woman I will be in 10 years, and to any mother staring at a phone that will not ring. I dated it in blue ink, folded the page once, and began with what I wish someone had told me when the first crack appeared in the cup. This is not a letter about winning. It is a letter about standing, about the quiet. You choose not the silence forced upon you, about remembering that a life is not a guest list. It is a threshold you are allowed to cross. Today, dear future me and dear you who are listening, if you are waiting for an invitation, you can stop waiting. The door to your own life is already unlocked. You do not have to earn your seat by being smaller, softer, or silent. Be kind and keep your name. Love people and still say no to erasure. Hold boundaries without raising your voice. Lift standards without shaming anyone. When fear says, keep the peace, ask peace for whom? Choose the quiet that protects dignity, not the quiet that hides harm. If respect is missing, bring it. If it will not arrive, withdraw your gift and keep your worth. Call things by their names. Then keep moving. When I paused the wedding, I did not punish anyone. I corrected the story. Paper can feel cold, but sometimes it is the clean bandage a wound requires. I thanked Rosa for the ledger that keeps our seasons honest, Marco for the steadiness that guards the door, Luke for the soup that remembers Daniel and the young clerk who brought tea when the room felt cold. I told myself to remember Ethan at dawn, standing in frost choosing truth even when it costs comfort. I promised to keep a chair open for him and for Sarah as long as respect sits in it first. That is the shape of peace I can live with. It is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of honesty. If the cup cracks again, and it will carry it with 2 hands. Speak less, write more, hold fast. Put your name where it belongs. If you feel yourself shrinking, step into the light and stand still until your breath returns. If you feel alone, reach for the people who have proven themselves steady. Chosen family grows like vines, one trellis at a time. I signed the letter and read it aloud in the kitchen. The house listened. Then I folded it and slid it under the Napa cut paper, under porcelain story, under symbol. I left it there like a small anchor. Enough weight to remind me that wholeness is not perfection. It is the courage to be held together. The weeks after the wedding unfolded like new leaves. Spring arrived with its riot of growth, tender shoots pushing from dark soil, the vines awakening to their ancient rhythm. I supervised pruning, met with distributors, approved new labels for summer releases. The business of the vineyard continued undisturbed by the winter's drama. What had changed was subtler. A shift in air pressure, a new clarity to the light. Ethan and Sarah visited on Sundays for dinner, a tradition they had initiated, not I. They arrived with farmers market flowers, artisan bread, questions about the vineyard. Sarah asked to learn about wine, about the seasons of growth and harvest. She walked the rows with Rosa notebook in hand, her city shoes gathering dust, her designer clothes incongruous among the vines. Watching her effort touched me more than her words of apology ever could. Ethan showed her the forklift where he had played pirate, the shed where I had counted tips when money was tight, the creek where Daniel had taught him to skip stones. He was building bridges between worlds, the childhood that shaped him, the marriage he was beginning, the heritage that belonged to both. Linda remained conspicuously absent from these Sunday gatherings. Her defeat had not been gracious. At the wedding reception, she had sat rigid, lips pursed, eyes hard. When Ethan acknowledged me from the microphone, she studied her plate, as if critical secrets were written in the sauce. When Sarah spoke her piece, Linda's face flushed crimson. She left before dessert was served, citing a headache, her husband trailing in her wake like a sail suddenly without wind. I did not celebrate her discomfort. Vindication was never my goal. But I recognized the moment for what it was. The collapse of a false narrative, the victory of truth over convenience, respect over erasure. A small correction in a world too often tilted toward those who demand sacrifice from others while offering none themselves. Margaret arrived unannounced one afternoon as I reviewed financial projections with Avery. She carried a cardboard box tied with twine, her expression both apologetic and determined. Still, I found these in the attic. I thought they should be here. Inside the box lay a stack of Daniel's notebooks, leather-bound journals I had assumed lost in our last move. His handwriting filled the pages. Vineyard plans, profit projections, sketches of expansion dreams, many realized only after his death. Among the business notes, personal reflections appeared like islands. Sylvia stronger than she knows. Remember the bank meeting? They looked at me until she spoke, then they couldn't look away. And later, taught Ethan to drive tractor today. He watches his mother more than me. Good. She's the one who will teach him to stand when the world pushes. I traced the words with my fingertip. Daniel's insights from beyond time. Margaret watched fidgeting with her purse strap. I should have given these to you years ago, she admitted. I took them after the funeral. I don't know what I thought. Maybe that I was protecting something of him. Maybe that I was protecting you from more grief. I was wrong to keep them. I held a page to the light saw where his pen had pressed deep on certain words, as if emphasizing what mattered most. Thank you for bringing them home, I said simply. She nodded, relieved at the absence of accusation. We sat on the porch with tea, the box between us, a bridge of sorts. For the first time since the wedding conflict began, she asked not about Ethan or Sarah or Linda, but about me, how the vineyard was doing, whether I planned to travel, what books I was reading, small questions, ordinary sisterhood, but offered now with a new attentiveness, as if she finally saw me not as an extension of family drama, but as a woman with a life of her own making. Later that week, I received an unexpected call from the Chamber of Commerce. Mrs. Hale, we'd like to feature Hale Vineyards in our summer tourism campaign. The focus is on women-owned businesses with deep community roots. The request surprised me, not because the vineyard wasn't worthy, but because local recognition had always been sparse. For years, I had been seen as Daniel's widow, carrying on his work not as the co-creator and sustainer of a thriving enterprise. Something had shifted in the valley's perception. Perhaps it was the wedding story which had traveled through town in various versions. Perhaps it was simply time revealing truth, the way it eventually burnishes all things to their essential nature. I agreed to the feature scheduled, the photographer prepared to tell the vineyard story publicly, not as vindication, but as testament to what endures when tended with care. The morning of the photo shoot dawned clear and warm. I walked the rows early, checking buds touching leaves, feeling the life pulsing through the land I had nurtured for decades. The photographer arrived, a young woman with a keen eye and respectful questions. She wanted authentic images, not posed marketing shots, but moments that captured the relationship between woman and vineyard. We moved through the property slowly, her camera capturing my hands, checking soil, my eyes assessing vines, my signature on delivery forms. Small, ordinary movements that strung together over years had built something lasting. As we neared the original section Daniel and I had planted together, she lowered her camera. Mrs. Hale, may I ask something personal? The wedding story, people are still talking about it. They say you stood up to your son's future mother-in-law when she tried to erase you, that you owned the venue and pulled the plug until they apologized. Is it true I touched a vine, felt the rough texture of bark against my palm? Truth is rarely as simple as stories make it, I told her. I didn't want drama. I wanted dignity. I wanted my son to understand that love without respect is just sentiment, that boundaries matter, that his mother has a name worth honoring. She nodded, then raised her camera again, capturing something new in my expression. Not defiance or triumph, but the quiet certainty of a woman who knows exactly where she stands and why. The photos, when published, showed not a grieving widow or a vindictive mother, but a vineyard keeper, with soil embedded in the lines of her hands and clear purpose in her eyes. A woman who had earned her place. The article accompanying the images told the vineyard's story from the beginning. The struggle, the loss, the rebuilding, the success. My name appeared throughout not as footnote, but as author. Daniel's contribution honored, but not overshadowing. A balanced accounting finally of what we had built together and what I had sustained alone. Summer ripened toward harvest. The vines hung heavy with fruit clusters swelling under attentive sun. Ethan called one evening as I finished inventory in the tasting room. "Mom Sarah's pregnant. We just found out." His voice trembled with a mixture of joy and terror I recognized from when Daniel had called his mother with the same news decades ago. The circle completing itself, generation touching generation. "We'd like you to be the first to know," he added, "before we tell anyone else, even Linda." The choice felt significant, a deliberate ordering of relationships, a clear statement of priority. I sat on the tasting room porch phone pressed to my ear watching sunset gild the valley. "Congratulations," I said. "To both of you. A baby changes everything." He laughed nervously. "We're terrified. Happy, but terrified." "Do you have any advice?" I thought. Of all the parenting wisdom I could offer distilled from years of trial and error. Instead, I gave him the truth that mattered most. "Remember that children learn what they live," I told him. "They watch how you treat others, how you honor boundaries, how you speak to their mother, how you acknowledge those who came before. That's the most important inheritance. Not money or property, but the example of how to move through the world with both kindness and dignity." He was quiet for a moment. Then "That's exactly what I needed to hear." The next day, Sarah called separately. Her voice held none of the timidity from our earlier conversations, nor the practiced sweetness of her mother's influence. "Mrs. Hale, Sylvia, I've been thinking about the baby, about becoming a mother. I have questions that I can't ask my mother. Would you have lunch with me? Just us." The invitation opened a door I hadn't expected. Not merely reconciliation, but genuine connection. A chance to be seen not just as Ethan's mother or the vineyard owner, but as a woman with experience worth sharing. We met at a small cafe in town, neutral ground for both of us. She arrived first, secured a quiet table rose when I entered. The reversal of our positions struck me. Months ago, I had been the one excluded, the one deemed unnecessary. Now I was being sought out, my presence specifically requested. She wasted no time on small talk. I'm afraid she admitted stirring her tea without drinking it. Afraid I'll be like my mother. Controlling, appearance obsessed, manipulative. I see how she treats people, how she treated you. I don't want to be that kind of mother, but I don't have many other examples. Her honesty disarmed me. The vulnerability behind her earlier behavior suddenly clear. A young woman raised by a mother who valued image above all, who taught her daughter that worth came from appearance, that control was love. "Fear makes terrible decisions," I told her. "Your mother was afraid too, of looking small, of losing status, of being overshadowed. Fear narrows vision until all you can see is threat. But there's another way to move through the world, from abundance rather than scarcity, from confidence rather than fear, from truth rather than appearance." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "That's what I saw in you," she confessed. "When you refused to be erased, when you held your ground without screaming or threatening, you showed me what dignity looks like, what strength looks like when it doesn't need to prove itself. I want to be that kind of mother." We talked through lunch and beyond, the conversation flowing naturally from motherhood to the vineyard, to her career ambitions, to hopes for the baby. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as an obstacle or an adversary, but as a woman at a crossroads, choosing her path with new awareness. As summer deepened toward fall harvest, preparations accelerated. I spent long days in the fields with Rosa, checking sugar levels, monitoring weather, coordinating crews. The work was consuming, but satisfying, the annual ritual of gathering what had been so carefully tended. Ethan joined us on weekends, eager to learn more about the business. One Saturday, as we walked the upper vineyard assessing ripeness, he asked a question that surprised me. "Mom, would you consider taking me on formally? As an apprentice, I mean. I want to learn this place from the ground up. Not as your son, but as someone who needs to earn his understanding." The request touched me deeply. Not because I had wanted or expected him to take interest in the vineyard, but because he was approaching it with humility rather than entitlement. He wasn't asking for keys to the kingdom. He was asking to learn how the kingdom was built stone by stone, season by season. It would mean major changes for him. Leaving his marketing job in the city, taking a significant pay cut, starting at the bottom of an industry he knew only from childhood memories. Why now? I asked, genuinely curious. He studied a cluster of grapes, testing firmness with gentle fingers, the way I had taught him decades ago. "Because I want my child to see me work for something meaningful," he said finally, "the way I saw you and Dad. And because I've realized that what you built here matters more than I understood. It's not just a business, it's a legacy of integrity. I want to be worthy of that." I didn't give him an immediate answer. Instead, I told him to draft a formal proposal: salary expectations, learning objectives, timeline. If he was serious about apprenticeship, he needed to approach it with professionalism, not family sentiment. He agreed without hesitation, his expression a mixture of determination and relief, as if the challenge itself confirmed he was on the right path. Harvest came in a flurry of activity, pickers moving through rows at dawn bins filling with fruit, the crush pad humming with machinery juice flowing into tanks, the controlled chaos of abundance. I moved between fields and production areas, checking tasting, adjusting my body, remembering the rhythm of these weeks, even as my mind calculated numbers and timing. In quiet moments between decisions, I found myself watching Ethan. He had taken vacation days to help with harvest, showing up before sunrise, staying until every last bin was processed. He worked alongside the regular crew, taking instruction from Rosa, learning the physical language of the vineyard in his muscles and bones. No shortcuts, no special treatment. Just a man discovering the land that had shaped his childhood, now through adult eyes. On the third evening of harvest, as twilight settled over the crush pad, I found him hosing down equipment, his shirt soaked with sweat and juice, his hands stained purple. Nearby, several crew members were sharing a meal, their conversation flowing easily between English and Spanish. They had included Ethan, naturally passing him tortillas, teasing him about his city-soft hands, teaching him vineyard slang. I stood back unnoticed, watching, as my son found his place not through authority or inheritance, but through shared work and mutual respect. The same path I had walked after Daniel died, when the crew looked to me with uncertainty, wondering if I would sell if their jobs were secure, if I could manage what had always been seen as my husband's domain. I had earned their trust one harvest at a time. Now Ethan was beginning the same journey. The proposal arrived on my desk the following week, professionally bound, comprehensive in scope. Ethan had done his research, outlining a 3-year apprenticeship covering every aspect of vineyard management and winemaking. The salary he proposed was modest, appropriate for the position. The learning objectives were specific and measurable, the timeline realistic. At the back, a personal statement explained his motivation. Not sentimentality, not obligation, but genuine desire to understand and eventually contribute to what had been built. I read it twice, looking for shortcuts or assumptions of privilege. Finding none, I signed the acceptance page and filed it with the official personnel records. Not in the family documents, but in the business archives, where it belonged. The announcement of his hiring circulated through the vineyard staff without fanfare. Just another personnel notice, intentionally matter-of-fact. If anyone found it noteworthy that the owner's son was starting at entry level, they kept their comments private. Rosa alone came to my office after reading the memo. "Miss Hale, he will start in the fields with the regular crews." When I confirmed this was the plan, she nodded approvingly. "Good. He should know the dirt before he touches the wine. That is how respect is learned, through hands that ache at the same hour as everyone else's." After she left, I stood at the window watching workers move through the last of the harvest. Among them, almost indistinguishable in work clothes and sun hat, my son. Not given authority, but earning his place. Learning the vineyard from its roots up the way his father and I had. The cycle continuing, but with new awareness, new intention. Fall mellowed toward winter. The vines surrendered their leaves, returning to the stark architecture of dormancy. In the production buildings, fermentation continued, its ancient alchemy juice transforming to wine under careful supervision. I divided my time between paperwork and cellar, between planning and doing. Ethan settled into his apprenticeship with surprising ease, absorbing technical knowledge, quickly building relationships with veteran staff, documenting everything in journals reminiscent of his father's. Sarah's pregnancy progressed, her body rounding, her presence at the vineyard becoming more frequent. She had taken leave from her interior design job, using the time to reconsider her career path. I often found her in the tasting room in the afternoons, sketching ideas for updating the space while maintaining its character. Her eye for design was undeniable, her suggestions thoughtful rather than trendy. She had a gift for honoring history while inviting renewal. One rainy afternoon, as we reviewed her concept boards, she mentioned Linda almost casually. Mom won't be visiting when the baby comes. She's decided to take a cruise instead. Her tone was neutral, but I caught the flicker of hurt beneath the words. Does that disappoint you? I asked, keeping my own voice even. She considered the question, hands resting on her belly. I thought it would, she admitted. I always imagined her being there teaching me, helping. But lately, I've realized I don't actually want her influence on my child. Not if it means teaching them that appearance matters more than truth. The admission cost her. I could see it in the tightness around her mouth, the brightness in her eyes. Recognizing the limitations of a parent is its own kind of grief. I touched her hand briefly, a gesture of understanding without words. That evening, as darkness fell early with the season, I sat in Daniel's old office reviewing the year's numbers. Production up, cost stable, distribution expanding steadily. The business health reflected in clean columns of black ink. Beyond the spreadsheets, though, lay the true accounting of the year. A wedding nearly derailed, then reimagined with authenticity. A son finding his way back to the land that shaped him. A daughter-in-law choosing a different path than her mother's. A grandchild growing soon to arrive in a family, learning the value of boundaries and respect. Not all wealth appears on balance sheets. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Ethan's voice came through, urgent, breathless. Mom, Sarah's in labor, early but not dangerously. We're at the hospital. They say it could be hours, but I could hear his fear, his excitement, his disbelief that the moment had actually arrived. I gathered my keys. My coat told him I was on my way. Not to take control, not to overshadow, but to witness, to be present, to hold space for this new chapter in our family's story. The hospital corridors gleamed under fluorescent lights, the air heavy with antiseptic and anticipation. I found Ethan pacing outside the maternity ward, hair-rumpled eyes wild. He hugged me fiercely when I arrived, clinging like the boy who had once fallen from the tractor, and run to me with skinned knees. Some moments strip us back to our essential selves, all pretense washed away by primal emotion. She's amazing, Mom, he whispered. So strong, so clear about what she wants. No drama, no fear, just focus. I smiled, recognizing the description. Like someone else I know, I told him. He pulled back, studied my face. Yeah, he said slowly. Exactly like you. The hours unfolded in the timeless rhythm of birth. Nurses came and went, monitors beeped. In the delivery room, Sarah moved through labor with determination and grit, refusing pain medication, insisting on moving freely, following her body's wisdom. Ethan stayed by her side, steady as a trellis supporting a vine heavy with fruit. I remained in the waiting area, present, but not intrusive, available when needed. Shortly after midnight, Ethan appeared in the doorway, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. A girl, Mom. Healthy, perfect, 6 pounds 4 ounces. They're cleaning her up now. Sarah wants you to come in. The invitation struck me. Not a courtesy, but a genuine desire for my presence. A chair deliberately set at this most intimate table. I followed him to the delivery room where Sarah reclined against pillows, exhausted but radiant. In her arms, a tiny bundle with a shock of dark hair. She looked up as I entered, her smile, tired but genuine. Meet your granddaughter, she said. Elizabeth Sylvia Hale. We're calling her Eliza. The middle name landed like a key turning in a long-locked door. A gesture not required by contract or convention. A choice made freely, an acknowledgement of connection deeper than obligation. I moved closer, looking down at the infant's face, the miniature features still swollen from birth, the tiny fists clenched against the bright new world. Ethan's daughter, Sarah's daughter, my granddaughter. A new branch on the family tree growing from roots that had endured both drought and abundance. Would you like to hold her? Sarah asked, already lifting the bundle toward me. The weight of the baby in my arms felt at once strange and familiar. The same precious burden I had carried when Ethan was born, when the future stretched unknown before me. Eliza squirmed, her face scrunching in momentary displeasure before settling back to sleep. Trust in its most elemental form. A new life surrendering to hands proven reliable. I studied her tiny features, searching for echoes of Daniel, of Ethan, of myself, finding instead something entirely new, a person unique and complete, carrying our stories forward, but writing her own. "Welcome to the vineyard, little one," I whispered. "The land is waiting to meet you." In the quiet hospital room, as Ethan and Sarah watched with tired smiles, I felt the circle complete itself. Not perfectly, not without scars, but with integrity restored. The journey from exclusion to inclusion, from erasure to acknowledgement, from broken to mended, like the cup that had traveled with me through these months of reckoning. Days later, I stood on the porch of the main house watching Ethan's car approach slowly up the drive. Their first visit home with the baby, carefully timed between feedings. Sarah had insisted on coming to the vineyard before anywhere else. "Eliza should see where she comes from," she had said, "where her roots are." They emerged from the car like new creatures, movements careful and coordinated around the precious cargo. Ethan carrying the car seat with exaggerated gentleness, Sarah hovering protective and vigilant, the transformation of two individuals into parents visible in every gesture. I waited on the porch, not rushing toward them, allowing them the dignity of this new identity. When they reached the steps, Ethan set the car seat down. Inside, Eliza slept oblivious to the significance of this homecoming. "Would you like to show her the vineyard?" I asked. "Or is it too soon?" Sarah smiled, her face softer than I had ever seen it. "It's not too soon," she said. "She should know this place from the beginning. I should too. I've only seen pieces of it. Never really understood the whole." Ethan lifted the baby carefully from her seat, cradling her against his chest. "We'll just walk a little way," he said. "Show her the old vines first, where it all started." The four of us moved slowly toward the original section of the vineyards, where Daniel and I had planted the first rows decades ago. The winter bare vines stretched in orderly lines, dormant but alive, storing energy for spring's renewal. The cycle visible in its resting phase, the promise of growth contained in apparent stillness. I watched Ethan and Sarah show their daughter the land, explaining in simple terms the seasons of the vineyard, the work that had built it, the family that tended it. Their voices gentle but clear, laying the foundation for understanding. Not hiding complexity, but making it accessible. I stood slightly apart, observing this first lesson, the teaching of roots and belonging, the passing of story from one generation to the next. Eliza would grow up knowing the truth of her family. Not a sanitized version, not a convenient narrative, but the authentic account of imperfect people finding their way back to respect. She would learn about the wedding that almost wasn't about the grandmother who refused erasure, about the parents who found courage to correct their course. She would understand that dignity sometimes requires standing firm, that love without respect is hollow, that boundaries protect what matters most. These would be her inheritance, more valuable than acres or accounts. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dormant vines, we turned back toward the house. Sarah paused, adjusting the blanket around Eliza's tiny form. "Mrs. Hale, Sylvia," she began hesitantly. "When I was growing up, my mother taught me that power comes from controlling how others see you, from never showing weakness, from always being the one who decides who matters." She looked down at her daughter, then back to me. "But you've taught me something different. That real power comes from knowing who you are and standing in that truth. From creating spaces where others can be their authentic selves too. I want Eliza to learn that from you, from both of us." The acknowledgement washed over me like gentle rain after drought. Not just words in a contract or a public statement, but genuine recognition from heart to heart. The hard-won understanding that had emerged from conflict and reckoning. We continued walking, the four of us moving together through the vineyard as evening descended. Above us, the first stars appeared distant and constant. Before us, the house-weighted windows glowing with welcome light. Behind us, the vines stood in patient rows, their work for the season complete, their roots holding firm beneath the soil. I thought of Daniel's old ledger, of his notation, beside the frost forecast, of the cracked cup still holding tea. Of all the ways we carry what matters through seasons of loss and renewal. The vineyard gate stood half open as we approached, neither locked against the world nor flung wide without discernment, just as I had left it, a boundary that acknowledged both protection and welcome, a threshold that honored those who crossed it and those who maintained it. I held it steady as they passed through my family carrying its newest member home.